Hello and welcome, or welcome back. I'm here today to share the story of our journey to owning a country home without a mortgage. My husband and I wanted to make sure we recorded this story while we were still young enough to remember most of the details, and we also wanted to be able to share it with a couple of young men in the family that are also beginning their adult journeys. Now, I already told you the 1-minute version of our story, so if that's all you have time for, go back and look for that video. As newlyweds, we had a need to build a home, and we had a goal to be able to own our home debt-free. Shortly after being married, we found out I was pregnant, so we've always been a one-income family. And for the first 7 or so years of our marriage, our annual income that we lived off of was between $30,000 and $40,000 a year. That was with my husband earning $20 an hour. And in a construction field, he didn't always work full time due to the weather. Now, we had never received any kind of inheritance, nor had anyone in our family that we knew of. But we did have the money that my husband had been saving before we got married. He had been working for several years, and he had saved up $25,000. And the biggest advantage we had starting us in this direction towards home ownership was that we had a lot of family with construction experience, whether it was in a specific trade or people that had built houses before. And so they were able to teach us a lot, give us direction, and we were able to use a lot of contractors in the area that they were familiar with. That was our basic starting point. And everyone has different starting points. We all have different things that we are blessed with or different advantages we have. We live in different times. We might live in different economies. But the one thing that we all have in common is our Creator. And when you give all that you have and when you do the best you can, God comes in and He fills in the rest for what you're not able to do. So don't let your circumstances be a limiting factor. Be aware of what you have and take advantage of it and be prepared to work hard. You know how when you're trying something for the first time and you're talking to other people that have a lot of experience in it, they tend to make it sound like, oh, it's easy, just do this and that, and it works just like that. Well, we were young, so we believed it would be that easy. And with that confidence, we started building a house. A family member loaned us the money to purchase land. And with the $25,000 that my husband had saved, we started clearing the land and building the home. We were blessed by many of those family and church members, sharing not only their expertise, but also giving us free labor for different portions of the construction. But we still ran out of money. Once the roof was up, we had to go to a local bank and borrow more money to be able to finish the house. And we finished what we thought was going to be our forever home. Just under $65,000 is what we owed once we paid back the relative that had loaned us money for land. And we had designed the house to be able to have a future addition. So we only built it with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and it was between 1,100 and 1,200 square feet. It was the fall of 2002, and 1 year after being married, we moved into our new home. We settled in with our new baby, and the money was pretty tight, especially with that mortgage payment. I remember going through several of our personal items and selling them on eBay or locally just to have extra money sometimes to pay the electric bill. Within our first year in the house, we went ahead and took the 8 acres that we owned the house on, and we cut it in half, and we kept 4 acres with the house, and we sold the other 4 acres. And my husband wanted to use that money to get us started on what had been a growing desire for him, a growing interest to invest in land and possibly building another house for sale. So we took the money from that 4 acres that we sold, and we bought a 5-acre lot just down the street, and we divided that 5-acre lot in half. So now we had 2.5-acre lots. We drew up a house plan for a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath rancher, And we went back to the same bank again, and they were willing to give us a construction loan since we already owned the land free and clear. I just want to insert a personal memory about building that house. We had started the foundation and we had the flooring system done, and Hurricane Isabel came ripping through our state. It was the fall of 2003, and I was so glad that we did not have the walls up yet, because I believe it would have ripped the walls down and sent them dancing everywhere. The way it tore the trees up in our area, and power was out for over 2 weeks. I was very grateful that we did not have the walls up at that point. But we got through the construction, and we had the house listed for sale for $129,000. And there was no one showing up to buy the house. It was a little disheartening. We had this loan. We were responsible for the payments. Money was already really tight, and we couldn't find a buyer at that price. So we made the decision to list both homes for sale. So we had the spec house listed for sale, and we listed our personal house for sale. We decided whichever one sold first, we would live in the other one. Now, the one condition that we gave the realtor when we listed our personal home for sale was that, yes, we're listing this for sale, but we can't actually sell it for 6 more months. The reason we did that was because in 6 months, it was going to be our 2-year anniversary of when we moved into the house. And there's a law, a U.S. tax law, that says if you live in your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years, then you don't pay any capital gains tax on the sale of that home. And that depends on your income level, but we knew we would qualify, and we needed every extra penny we could get out of our home. So we wanted to wait until the 2 years was up before we moved. And guess which house sold? Our forever house. So we moved. Our house sold for $136,000, somewhere in there, give or take $2,000 or $3,000. But we ended up moving into the spec house, a house we had never planned to actually live in. This second house was a little closer to the main road, built closer to the road it was on. It wasn't as private. It just wasn't where we planned to stay. And as it happened, the housing market was beginning to climb. 10 months after we moved in to house number 2, we were able to sell it for $160,000. That was $30,000 more than we couldn't sell it for the year before. So because we didn't live there for a full 2 years, we did end up paying capital gains tax. And that year we ended up owing around $10,000. And we had saved that amount from the sale proceeds. So we weren't shocked by it when the tax bill came in. While we were going to build house number 3, we needed somewhere to live. We didn't want to be locked into a lease for a rental for a year. And thankfully, a relative let us move in with them for the few months it was going to take us to build. It actually only took us 4 months to build this time. I think because we had enough experience with the other 2 houses behind us. We knew exactly how to schedule the contractors, what order, how to schedule them ahead of time and back to back. So there was no downtime during the construction build. There was always something happening. After our first home, we never asked for free help from relatives or church members. Again, we figured, once was a love gift that they gave us. And if we chose to keep moving, then the costs were our responsibility to keep paying. So now we've reached the end of 2005. We've been married 4 years and we're moving into our 3rd home. Our annual income was still low. Several years we went without taking even vacations. Even if family was going to let us stay in a house with them on vacation, we couldn't afford to actually not work. So we didn't even leave town for a vacation. We didn't really have a need to budget because we were just paying the bills every week. But we did strictly calculate the expenses of every house we built so that we knew what our exact profit was and we could return a faithful tithe and offering on that profit, which we also returned on our regular weekly checks also. We still had a mortgage in house number 3, although it was lower, and maybe $30,000 to $40,000, somewhere in there. But we decided while the market was really hot, we were going to try and build another spec house to sell. Now I'm speeding through all these years, but life was hectic and house building added on more responsibility. Remember, this was just a side job. My husband still worked full time as much as construction allowed, and his job usually required an hour commute each way. And then in the evenings, he would come home and supervise the house construction, do the parts he was doing physically himself. He would work on Sundays. I was home, taking care of a home with a child, but I also did a lot of the non-physical work, made phone calls, orders, purchases. I would meet different contractors at the house site during the days to keep things moving forward. So it was an extremely busy time of our lives. House number 4 was another new adventure because we were working in a different county, dealing with different county officials, and we were building in an established neighborhood that had covenants. And that whole thing made us firmly decide to never build in a neighborhood again. But the house did sell. It almost felt like it just barely sold, but it did sell. And the sale of house number 4 paid off our mortgage for the home we were living in, which was house number 3. So we're approximately 7 years into marriage, and we are now debt-free. And don't think we weren't a little foolish. We would soon buy a brand new Honda CR-V right off the lot. But no rest for the weary. We soon found out that our county was going to put in a multi-state landfill within half a mile of our house. And that just didn't sit well with us. We didn't want to live near that. So since we were past our 2-year mark in our home, we went ahead and listed it for sale. And the house sold for around $185,000. So we walked away from that house, and having built a total of 4 houses, we had now $150,000 in cash and a vehicle that was only a year old. We bought land for our next home in a more expensive county, but we built with more space to this house, and we did have a few extras because we knew we were going to be selling this house again. Because again, we were on a lot that was this time on a major highway, and we didn't want to end up there forever. It was a 2.5 acre lot. So we put some extras into this house to hopefully give it good resale. And when we finished building house number 4, after we had invested all $150,000 into that house, we came out owing $20,000. Once we had been in house number 5 for our 2 years, we listed it for sale. But the 2008 housing market crash had had its effect in our area, and we were not able to sell the house then, and it was going to take a couple more years before we could. Another effect of the downturn in the economy was there was not as much need for masonry work since there was less of a housing market. And thankfully, my husband was able to get a job at a commercial masonry company. And there he became a foreman, and he was making $24 an hour. This was a pay raise for us. But now that I understand markets and economics better, I see that his pay raise was really just keeping up with the cost of living increases. The housing market not only kept us locked in our home, unable to sell it, but we dared not build a spec house. In an attempt to earn another side income, we borrowed $40,000 against our equity line, and within 6 to 12 months, we realized that the money was gone for good, with no benefit to us, except being able to file the loss on our taxes. And now, instead of owing $20,000 on our home, we owed $60,000. After 3 years at the highly stressful commercial foreman job, my husband decided to venture out on his own to become a self-employed mason. While being employed offered stability and a consistent income, being self-employed meant he could earn more in less time. It was a new and scary responsibility that he had now acquired, but that was actually the beginning of increasing our annual income. We were also blessed with 2 more children while we lived in this home, but interestingly enough, that brought about the need for a larger vehicle. Most cars, while they have 3 seat belts in the back, you can't fit 2 car seats plus a third person because the car seats cover up all of the seat belts. So we got another new vehicle that was a little larger, which gave us a bigger payment. Finally, in early 2013, our home sold. We had to drop the price to under $200,000 and ended up leaving there with only $125,000 cash and our newish SUV. While we were glad to finally be away from that loud location, it was discouraging and felt a little like we'd wasted 4.5 years on our journey to our dream of being debt-free on a real country property. I'm sure a lot of people would have felt overjoyed to have that kind of cash, but it was a financial loss for us. Meanwhile, our vision for a quiet country home had grown, along with our family size. We'd been making a wish list of what kind of property we wanted and had been diligently searching. My husband and I each had a few different items on our wish list, but they didn't totally mesh well in reality. He wanted to be within an hour of the capital city for the sake of his commuting time. We both wanted at least 10 acres, more than we'd ever owned before, and a quiet and well-kept location with good neighbors. Number cruncher me kept pointing out that our maximum budget for land was $30,000 if we were going to have any chance of being debt-free on this build. And when you put together land amount plus area plus dollar amount we wanted to spend, it was an unrealistic expectation. There was not anything that size land, that close to the capital, that we could afford. Everything that was affordable to us was probably 90 minutes to 2 hours from the capital. So it was a bit of a tug and war between husband and wife. I wanted to be further out and be affordable, but he insisted he did not want to be driving more than an hour to work each day if he could avoid it. Once our home was under contract for sale, the search got really hot and heavy. And my husband had remembered seeing some land for sale online during the last year. And he was driving down a street, probably 2 miles from our current house, looking for this land that was for sale. And he didn't see a for sale sign, but he stopped where he thought it was and went walking along the edge. And in the woods, there was a for sale sign by a realtor laid down on the ground, like covered in vines and leaves. So he called that number, and the real estate company told him the land was no longer for sale. It wasn't listed with them anymore. So then he went to the courthouse, looked up the property information to find out who owned the land, and a bank owned it. It had gone into foreclosure. And the bank said, no, we're not going to sell directly to you. It's not for sale. So we waited, kept looking, and then all of a sudden, it popped back up for sale with the same realty company again. So my husband contacted a realtor, called about the land, and the land was for sale for around $75,000 for 10 acres. And we told the realtor, listen, we want you to offer them $42,000. It was a little more than we thought we could afford in our budget, but we thought maybe that was the lowest they would probably go if they were going to go low. There was lots of foreclosures at that time because of the crash from 4 years ago, and lots of banks were unloading property. So the realtor laughed at us, and she was kind of insulted that we wanted her to offer the bank $42,000 for this lot, but she did it anyway. And she called us back so surprised that the bank accepted our offer and was going to sell this 10 acres to us for $42,000. So we did the normal things that we do with land. The contract was pending finding a normal septic. And the septic work came back and showed it wasn't going to be a normal septic. It had to be an engineered system. So we went back to the bank again and said, hey, the septic has to be engineered. It's going to cost more. Will you pay for half of that? And the bank said yes. So they lowered the land price again. So our purchase price for this 10 acres was $34,500. Needless to say, we were absolutely shocked. We were speechless for so long, and we didn't even realize right away. It kind of dawned on us over time that we'd actually gotten everything on both of our wish lists. And it wasn't just about the price. The land sat well. The house site was perfectly where we would have wanted it to be. There's a creek on the property, and this property was almost all hardwoods for at least the last 70, maybe 80 years. And prior to this, all of the land we had ever lived on was cut over pine that may have been replanted in the last 10 years. And there just wasn't hardwood to sustain a fire on your own property. We were always buying wood from other places. And this place just seemed perfect for us. Our previous family member that had housed us during 2 of our home builds had moved, and they could no longer house us. But gratefully, our in-laws did. They had space for the 5 of us to be comfortable, and we expected, why wouldn't we expect it, that this house would only take us 3 to 4 months to build, like the last few houses that we had built had taken. But it turns out we made 2 decisions that were going to be errors. The first one was we believed the assumption that building a small 2-story house would cost the same or less than the same square footage of a rancher. So we had always built 1-story houses. And we'd heard people say, oh, less foundation, less roof, you get more house for the same amount of money. So we believed that. And the second thing was we knew we had less money to build. And because everything worked out so nicely for this property, we thought, this is it. This is going to be our forever house. This is house number 6. We're going to build house number 7 in heaven. So we're going to get this one right this time. We're going to be debt-free with the construction of this house. So what we thought was we would just do a whole bunch of the labor ourselves, as much as possible, more than ever before, and that would save us money. But here's what we learned. Everything is either time or money. I mean, we've all heard that, but here's how it worked out. See, you can't do fast and cheap unless you're willing to do shoddy work. So if you want quality work and you want it fast, it's not going to be cheap. If you want quality work and you want it cheap, it's not going to be fast. You can only have one or the other. And we were trying to do all 3. And the reason it didn't work out was because each section of the construction was taking so long for us to do it. And while we're doing that, my husband wasn't working at his normal self-employed projects. So we weren't having income while it was taking us a long time to do the construction. And we didn't want to live off of the $125,000 that we brought from our last sale. We wanted to put all of that money into the construction. So each time we would get a little bit into a portion of the building, we'd realize this is taking too long. You can earn more money if you go to work and pay someone else to finish this that's actually skilled in that field. And so we did that repeatedly with different parts of the construction. We would start it and then realize, let's pay someone else to do it. And then when that person came in to do it, they weren't giving us a discount for the portion of the work we had done. They were charging us the regular full price. And that's how it didn't save us money. And it didn't save us time. It was also the absolute rainiest summer we had ever seen in our adult lives. And it ended up taking us 10 full months to build a house. Our poor in-laws thought we were going to be in and out in 3 months. No, 10 months. And the worst part, for us anyway, was that by the time we moved in, we owed $85,000 on the house that we had built. I certainly don't want to discourage anyone if they have the skills and they have the time to do a whole lot of work themselves building their own house. Just make sure you understand it's going to take a lot of time and you have to have some other income to support you while you're doing all that work. Now, I don't want you to think that we owed $85,000 for nothing. We did have a bigger house. This is the biggest house we'd ever built. It was a little over 2,000 square feet. We built it as a Cape Cod, and we originally intended for it just to have 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. But I did have someone else design this house for me. In the past, I had always done the floor plans, but I wasn't familiar with how to draw a second story to code. So I paid someone else to do the upstairs and complete the whole floor plans for me. And they showed me that if I changed my roof line in the back, instead of just having storage in the eaves in the back, it could be a whole other bedroom. So we did that, and we ended up having 3 bedrooms upstairs. So the house altogether is 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. We also made the porches on the south side and the west side brick porches instead of wood. We'd had wood before, and it deteriorates very quickly on those sides of the houses because of how intense the sun is. And since my husband's a mason and we get the labor for free, then we went ahead and did brick porches there. We wanted them to be more permanent. We also splurged and got a wood cook stove, which was $2,500. But we knew we wanted to still heat our house with wood, and the possibility of cooking with the wood stove was very important to us. But we still only had the bare minimum of clearing around the house, because you can always clear later. We had no sidewalks, no outbuildings, just a little 10 by 12 shed that my husband mostly used for his tools for work. During the 10 months we were living with my in-laws, we discovered two important things that really changed the direction of our lives. One was that we could have a garden without having a tractor. And if you want to know a little bit more of that story, you can look at my other video about how our garden has changed over the last 9 years. But the other thing was we discovered money management via Dave Ramsey. I skimmed a few chapters of one of his books, and we decided to get our SUV paid off. Around that time, we also read a few quotes like these. We saw how God had been blessing us over the years, and we had already increased our giving. But after this additional revelation of God's expectations of the nation of Israel, we decided to test God and give it a try, see if it would work, if we also obeyed the same expectations. Now, I'm telling you this because we both believe, it was an integral part of how our future changed with our finances. We also went ahead and took Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University course. And we didn't follow his steps exactly, but we followed the principles and we made it work for us. We still had just over 3 years of payments left on our SUV, but just by disciplining ourselves and putting extra money on the payments each month, we actually ended up paying it off within 6 to 9 months. So right as we were moving into the house in 2014, we had the SUV paid off. 2014 rolled by. We were making minimum payments on the mortgage. We may have had $1,000 in savings by the end of the year. And then in 2015, my youngest daughter in March fractured her femur while she was kicking a ball. And at the end of May, I broke and completely shattered my ankle. Between the two of us, because we had no health insurance, we had right at $30,000 in medical bills. Now that's a story in itself. The fact that we had all of that paid off in less than a year. God definitely was increasing our income. We did receive about $14,000 in love gifts. It's another story, but that expense was very scary when it came, but it was paid off by maybe January of 2016. The experiences and the learning that came with those two injuries and healing from them are another story. So we'll just stick to the financial part of it. So because that money was owed and it was a whole lot, it really drove us back to paying attention to our budget and looking over the steps that we had learned from Dave Ramsey and making sure we were applying them and we were really focused in how we were spending our money, because our income was going up and it was a temptation to just start spending on frivolous things. But now we had this additional money that we owed for medical bills, plus our mortgage was maybe down to around $80,000 by the end of 2015. And it was a burden and it was a worry because, again, our goal was to be debt-free. Like, that was really on our hearts. And even though we thought this is our last house, we'll build the next one in heaven, we were really to the point of, do we sell one more time? The market's going up. We can make a really good profit. Do we sell and move just one more time and then be debt-free? But my husband really felt like, no, I really believe we can pay this house off quickly. If we buckle down and we really pay attention to our spending, I really believe we can pay this house off in 2 years. I wasn't so sure about it. I was ready to move. I was like, no, let's call a realtor. But we went ahead and we made budgets every month and we stuck to them every month. And what we did was we said, all right, Lord, this is what we need to live on. These are the bare minimums, for food and electric and for the children, like really simple, basic budget. and we said, we're still returning our tithes and offerings. Anything extra that comes in above our budget that we have written down, we will put on the mortgage, no matter what it is. We won't go on a fancy vacation, nothing. If extra comes in, we're putting it on the mortgage. And the reason we did that was because we had a variable income. Being self-employed, some months you earn more, some months you earn less. And over the years, we had learned on the months when you earn more, you save it for future months when you know you're going to earn less, like in the winter. And so this change up in how we were going to do our budget with our goal for paying the house off was every month at the end of the month, once we have met our minimum budget needs, we are going to take 100% of the extra and give that amount to the Lord and to our mortgage, nothing else. Well, the first few months, we would have $1,000 to $3,000 extra to put on the mortgage over and above the minimum payment. And then summer hit. And as always, when you're self-employed in a construction field, summer is usually busier. Well, summer got really busy. Suddenly, we were making an extra payment, anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 a month extra on the mortgage, multiple months in a row. So although my husband's goal had been to pay our home off within 2 years, and I wasn't really believing that was going to be possible, the Lord made it possible. And 10 months after we had set that budget that we were going to live on and give all the rest to the Lord and the mortgage, 10 months later, we were completely debt-free. On the day of our 15th wedding anniversary, we walked into the local bank and we gave them the final payoff check for our mortgage. There wasn't any fanfare, there wasn't any extreme excitement or a debt-free scream. We were just too shocked for any of that. We were debt-free, 100%. No personal debt, no business debt, no mortgage. Yes, we had been debt-free once before on house number 3, but this time we had paid off an $80,000 debt in under a year. Never before had we even earned $80,000 in a year, much less had that much left over after our monthly budgeting needs. We determined to remain responsible with our funds and have lived with a budget ever since. You see, we had our country home and we were debt-free, but there was still a lot of work to do to really make this a homestead. You need more than just a house. And we didn't want to go into debt to do those things, so we had to discipline ourselves, and we have always, since then, saved cash for everything we do. Any project we've done on the house, anything we've bought, we have taken the time and patiently waited to save up for it and then pay cash for it. In addition to being self-employed, we have still kept up a side hustle as the market has allowed. In 2019 and in 2021, we bought a foreclosed house and we renovated ourselves and sold it. We've bought and sold land. And these were what made it possible for us to finally have an emergency savings account. That was one of the steps that we did out of order from Dave Ramsey's plan. We waited until we were completely debt-free before we started setting aside funds for big emergencies. But we also have been setting aside funds for real estate investments with the goal of retirement funds should the Lord delay his coming. Now, we've certainly made our share of poor decisions financially, but we learned from them and we pressed forward. We also learned that when we put 100% of our effort towards something, that God will come in and take care of the parts that may have seemed impossible or out of our reach or ability. We've definitely believed for a long time now that you can't outgive God. The sheer pleasure of knowing that you have the financial ability to help your own family as well as bless others can't be described sufficiently enough. Disaster could strike tomorrow, but we know who is in charge of tomorrow, and we pray for the grace to remain faithful and true to Him. If you are on your journey to a debt-free country home, these are the 3 condensed pieces of advice that we would give. Number 1, expect to move. Unless you already have the cash that you need to buy a house outright, or the plan and the ability to repay your debt quickly. Just expect to move. Don't aim for your ideal dream property or your forever home at first. Move somewhere that you can improve with sweat equity and plan to move again in 2 to 3 years. Then reinvest your profit in the next property. Repeat as often as needed. Be a pilgrim. Number 2, expect hard work and challenges. Our experience was long and hard. Life happens. Satan loves to put roadblocks or throw stones in your pathway. As I read from M.L. Andreasen recently, turn those roadblocks into stepping stones along your journey. And number 3, set a budget. Live on less than you earn and find a way to earn more. Don't expect anyone to hand you anything for free. Grow your knowledge or skill base until you can earn an honest, viable living. Then you tell every single dollar where it's going to go each month, each paycheck. People don't accidentally fall into debt, barring medical emergencies, and no one accidentally gets out of debt. It takes purpose, determination, and discipline. And I would wager it's near impossible to have financial success unless both adults are on the same page with their financial and family goals. Don't do this his money, her money thing. It doesn't build a unified team. Discuss every purchase you make if it wasn't previously discussed during the monthly budget planning meeting. My husband has never treated me like what he earned was his money and I couldn't spend it. And I have never mismanaged, too poorly, the money that my husband earns. It is our money, and as a couple, we both stay in constant communication about our finances, always constantly open and talking, because we are a team. Our story would not be the same if we weren't a team. While that may be the end of how we became debt-free on our own country property, that's not the end of our story. Life continues, projects continue, and we hope to keep growing in the Lord and our skills and to be able to share with others. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We would love to help where we can. Until next time, remember to live joyfully. Make the most of today.